Do you feel stressed when you speak another language? You fear forgetting the words. You freeze up. You even could lose face when handling a conversation in English. And that's exactly why I connected with cross-cultural coach Jennifer Kumar from Authentic Journeys. She'll help give you a set of skills English learners need to be aware of and that are absolutely crucial for successful interactions in person, at the office, and online. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks, Ethan. I'm so happy that you were able to have me.
And if you have ever felt embarrassed or scared to speak English, then check out what Real Lifer Pollock says. Since they are following our channel, they have gained the knowledge that they need to speak English confidently. And you will too. So remember to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so that you don't miss a single new lesson. Nowadays, we have a feeling of what it's like to be a movie star as we continually find ourselves in front of a camera. We have video interviews, live streaming conferences, speeches, and even interactions on social media via video. If you are not prepared, it can be a nerve-wracking experience. But it can also be an exciting way to connect with people that you never thought possible. So I asked Jennifer what things you need to consider when communicating on camera.
Yeah, actually, people have asked me about this. Should I make gestures on the camera or should I not? Well, how will different cultures respond to this? Since I tend to work mostly between the US and India, at least those two cultures seem to be pretty similar in, at least what I've seen, as to sometimes use gestures like this just to express along with what you're talking. They're not big, expansive gestures and you're not like jumping up and down and everything. But I think, again, it comes back to trying to get a context of the other culture and how they're we're all learning this together as we work together online. And I think the culture really hasn't been set yet on what the actual expectation is for a virtual environment. But what I've tended to see, at least with the companies I've worked with in India, and some of them have like offices in other countries, is people tend to default to a more Western approach when they're in the virtual environment. So they tend to make subdued gestures or avoid gestures. Some people totally avoid, but at the same time, you don't want to go in with like a very stone face or like to sit like this the whole time and not move, because if you're doing this even in a normal environment, nobody will want to listen to you. They'll just like tune out and fall asleep. So you want to make it somewhat interesting and engaging. Change the tone of your voice. Sometimes you go a little faster. Sometimes you go a little slower. Sometimes you emphasize certain words, and like even emphasize with my hands, or different things like that.
Nowadays, we're all talking via video chat, like so many of us. We've transitioned online, and it's becoming very common that you'll have a Zoom call with someone who's in France and Germany and Japan and in Brazil and India. Obviously, since we're seeing each other on camera and everything, the body language is still very important. So are there any tips that you give people so that they're hopefully not too self-conscious about their body language and maybe how they can use this to their advantage?
Right. So, I mean, you do want to also set up your surroundings so it promotes a good body language. So have something first that helps you to have a good straight posture, so you're not like leaning in too much like this or like leaning way back like that, or whatever. I mean, occasionally you can move into the camera depending on who you're talking to and what your relationship is. Some people do this, but if you're in a formal presentation, I would stay away from that personally. But you can use some gestures. Just make sure they're not so big that they're kind of going off the screen. Or you can even bring in some props, like you're talking about your phone. You can show your phone, and that just gives some additional visuals to the people. So you could use screen share, but that can get boring. So if you have something to actually show people, and then tell a story about it, depending on the type of work you do or the type of things you're talking about. Like, let's say you're starting your business call and you're talking about your weekend, and last weekend you went to an art show and you bought a piece of art or a sculpture, you could actually show that, while you're talking about it, just to make it interesting. When we couldn't do that in the office because you're not actually taking that to the office, but the person could actually see that. And you got that little statue of an elephant. That's really cool. So do you like elephants? So you could, expand the conversation from there. So you just want to make sure you have really good posture, and it also gives some people visual interest rather than just kind of always looking at you or you always looking at them if you share different things. If it blends into your work, even better. If you're able to use actually the other day I was on a meeting with this one client of mine, and he had a flip chart right behind him. So he was using the flip chart instead of PowerPoint. He would stand up with it and talk, and he was feeling comfortable doing that, and that's great. You just want to make sure in those cases, see, when we're sitting down, it's easy for us to just have our face in the front of our body, facing the camera, but when we're standing up, we might change position. So we just always want to make sure that you're at least at a 45-degree angle to the camera. You don't want to have your back to the camera, and you don't want to be perpendicular to the camera, at 90 degrees. You'll lose people's interest. If you have the opportunities and you have space for it, you can have a separate area where you have good lighting. That helps. That does help as far as people being able to see you properly. Because sometimes when it's too dark or it's backlit, it just impacts how other people listen, because you might say everything perfect, but if your image is there and it's not clear for whatever reason, it could be distracting to other people.
So speaking of interacting on camera, why don't you start putting Jennifer's tips to practice while also practicing your English? We want you to achieve confident, fluent English so that you can understand fast-spoken English, be understood by anyone, and connect to the world. That's why we proudly built the RealLife English app to help learners like you to practice your English wherever and whenever you want. So just log in, press a button, and you will be instantly connected to another English speaker in a different part of the world for a dynamic and fun conversation. On top of that, you can also listen to the full interview with Jennifer and other experts and teachers with a transcript and vocabulary definitions. And guess what? It's all absolutely free. So download it right now by searching for RealLife English in the Apple app or Google Play Store. Or you can simply click up here or down the description below. So just like when having face-to-face interaction, there is a natural tendency to sometimes speak too fast or too quietly when interacting with others. This can make you appear nervous or make you difficult to understand. Just remember to slow it down. So before we check out Jennifer's next tip, let me ask you, how do you feel when you have to speak English?
What I notice anyway, people talk louder and tends to talk faster in their native language. And the rooms become very lively in that case. And then when we switch over to English, sometimes it's almost very silent, pin drop silent at first, or it's you can distinctly hear certain people talking. But then they ease into the activity and they really like it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, because in my own language learning, sometimes it's kind of the timidness that you feel when you're speaking a foreign language, that you almost want to speak quieter because, then they won't hear your mistakes and stuff. But that is a really bad habit, because then, they won't really hear you or understand you at all. You're going to have to repeat yourself and stuff. So I think that's kind of interesting to be aware of, is how are you speaking the same volume-wise in a foreign language as you do in your native language?
And actually, Ethan, just to build on to that, when we are in a virtual space, especially if people are working in a global company, some of your listeners, beside the body language on a call, it's important to know our volume when we're speaking too. So that's another good thing that this recording helps us to understand. How are people actually hearing the volume of our voice? Is it clear enough? Is it loud enough without being too loud? people tend to think, at least people that I worked with in India, tend to think an American's normal voice is a shouting sound, which, yes, to some extent, yes, I would agree. And it can sound a little, or maybe a lot, intimidating. If it's somebody in the US and you're working with somebody from a culture where they tend not to speak so loud, it might be wise to try to lower the volume, because it gives a more friendly appearance to your voice.
That's a good tip. I think, I mean, we've talked a lot about observation. I think observation is always key, because too, you can look at people's faces and see like, okay, do they look like maybe they're you know, their faces are getting screwed up because they're confused, or they're not understanding what you're saying, or are people like leaning in to try to hear you better? Even I notice myself that I do that. I think a lot of people will actually lean in closer to the screen to try to hear you better, even though, you know, that doesn't actually work. And the opposite, maybe if people, if they seem like you're yelling or something in their ear, maybe they'll have like a certain reaction.
So as we all know, remote communication is different from live interaction. So there's a need for communication strategies that help ideas to be better understood by everyone involved in the communication process. It can be crucial to have a coach or mentor to help you to learn the subtleties of tactful communication. So Jennifer shares a story about the differences in written communication between Americans and Indians that illustrates how important this is.
I was running my business from India, so I had to write a lot of correspondence in English to my clients. So there was one interaction where I was a little unsure how to frame this one email. So I had a mentor. She's amazing. She grew up in India and is very fluent in Indian English. So I told her the scenario. I sent her my email before I sent it to my client, and I said, could you give me some tips? How would someone in India like understand this email? How would they interpret it? Have I expressed it in a respectful way? And she's like, she knew what I was trying to say because she knew American English, and she's interacted with a lot of people from the US. She's like, I understand what you're saying, but the person here in India will get offended. And then we sat down, and it actually took 2 hours to rewrite that email. And the new email felt so foreign to me.
I hope you've enjoyed these precious tips. Don't forget to join our community where we help you to understand fast English, be understood by anyone, and connect to the world by clicking on the subscribe button and bell down below. Now, if you are ready to speak English more confidently, then you have to check out Teacher Tiffany's tips in this video. Let's watch a short clip of that now.
My main desire is to help other people. I feel like I'm on this earth to help other people flourish and to do well. And my job at NASA was great. My boss was amazing. The situation was great. It was a very good job, and I liked what I did. But I remember one day I was sitting at my desk, and I had finished a project, and I was like, there has to be more.